What's up, everybody? Welcome into episode 48 of the Two Stripes podcast. My name is Colton Denning. I'm your host, coming to you from Boulder, Colorado, late in the week. It's Thursday, February 22nd, 2018. Hope everybody is having a great week as we march through the college football offseason and get towards spring practice and spring games for everybody across the country. Before we begin today's show, just want to remind everybody to go to soundcloud.com/twostripespod, find the show there, and subscribe to the show by going on to Apple Podcasts and searching the Two Stripes podcast. Been a couple weeks since I've done a show, but back today with what I think is a pretty entertaining and informative look at the next team in this informal offseason preview series that I'm doing here for the 2018 offseason, and that's the Cal Golden Bears. Cal is about to begin their second season under head coach Justin Wilcox. They went 5-7 last year in his first season, but they were an interesting team. Sonny Dykes left them, I want to say, in January of last year, and Justin Wilcox kind of had to cobble together his first recruiting class. And I think for a first season just kind of put together, they did all right. They were really close to making a bowl game. They lost their last two games by 3 points each against Stanford and UCLA. And if you told me that that's how Cal's season would have ended before the year, I would have been completely shocked. So all things considered, it was a pretty decent year for them. But as they move into year two, there is a lot of change amongst all Pac-12 schools. And it seems like this year might be ripe for the taking if Cal, not to say that they're going to make a jump up to 8 or 9 wins or anything, but if they want to make some noise and get back to a bowl game, this would appear to be the year. So on today's episode, I had a chance earlier this week to talk with one of the contributors over at California Golden Blog's SB Nation's Cal blog, Nick Kranz, about all things Cal and what he expects out of the 2018 season, or as we head to the 2018 season with spring ball just right around the corner. Some of the stuff we talked about, quarterback battle, really going to be huge for them this year. Whoever gets that job is going to have a lot to work with. Cal might have one of the most underrated skill position groups, especially at wide receiver in the country. And then talked a little bit about defensively. Justin Wilcox has a background in defense, and he was able to improve their defense by a lot last season. So I'm interested to see how they take another step forward in 2018 in a conference that has a lot of change, a lot of new head coaches, and to see if they can take advantage of that. So with all that being said, let's get into today's episode. It's time to talk some Cal football, and to do that, I am joined by one of the contributors for CaliforniaGoldenBlogs.com. His name is Nick Kranz. Nick, thanks for joining the show today, man.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I hope wherever you are is nicer than Boulder, Colorado right now. I'm looking out of my window, and there is 5 inches of snow, so I hope it's warm and sunny wherever you are.
Well, it's a little bit colder than average here, but it's California cold, so if I complained, you would be able to rightfully make fun of me.
Hey, I already saw some people I follow in LA on my Twitter timeline that were complaining that it was 58 degrees. So I'm already very mad online about that. But let's get into today's topic of the show, and that's talking about the Cal Golden Bears. And last season, Cal went 5-7 in head coach Justin Wilcox's first year. They were 87th in S&P Plus. They were 5-5 going into their last 2 games and lost both of those by 3 points. But they had their moments last year. So in your eyes, before we talk a bit about 2018, what did you think about the 2017 season, and was it a success?
It's a qualified success. I think Cal fans wanted to see 2 things. They wanted to see a defense that was functional, because that had not been at all a fixture in the Sonny Dykes era. And they wanted to, by extension, be competitive in as many games as possible. And while the defense wasn't a shutdown defense, there was a vast improvement from 2016 to 2017, and that allowed Cal to win a couple of games in a way that they had not been winning games in years. And other than kind of a brief midseason hiccup against Oregon and Washington, they were really competitive throughout the schedule. They lost a few close games. It was a little bit of a bummer not to get to a bowl. I think, it's one of those situations where any number of a couple other games could have, the coin could have landed heads instead of tails, and they would have finished 6-6 and gotten a nice little trip as a reward. But that doesn't really change how we view the season in terms of progressing towards a more balanced, functionally sound team than it was under Sonny Dykes.
One thing that really strikes me about Justin Wilcox and that dichotomy between him and Sonny Dykes is just the fit overall. Wilcox is a West Coast guy. He played football at Oregon. He's been at Washington, and it never really seemed like Sonny Dykes or even his staff really kind of fit the mold for what Cal or their fans expect. Has that been something that's kind of shaken out, not only in the program overall, but in recruiting? It just seems like Justin Wilcox is a better fit for that job than what Sonny Dykes was.
I think culturally that's certainly true. Recruiting is kind of hard to say at this point. If you just look at the recruiting rankings, you'll see Wilcox bring in a class similar in the national rankings to where Dykes was, but with a very different profile, much more California guys, Northern California guys, local guys, whereas Dykes was kind of, looking in the Southeast, Texas a little bit, kind of going national. But Wilcox knows what he's getting into at Cal. He was here as an assistant coach in the Tedford era. He's familiar with the culture of the school, which unfortunately is an important thing because our administration is not necessarily the most football savvy or football supportive type, and that really bothered Dykes. He wasn't used to having an administration that didn't really care about football. And so it's good to have a guy coming in who is used to that and isn't going to be off-put by it.
So we just passed National Signing Day, and I'm glad that you brought up recruiting because Cal brought in 21 kids in their class of 2018. They finished 43rd in the 24/7 sports composite, which was good for 8th in the Pac-12. And they were 70th last year, which was last. But again, there was that late coaching change. Justin Wilcox didn't have that much time to put together a class. And you referenced there being a lot more California kids. Did he or any of his staff reference not only just wanting to bring in a lot of California kids and a lot of Bay Area kids, but also what type of player that they're looking for?
I don't know if they have a player profile that we've really figured out as fans yet. The recruiting class, the idea behind it was to be really line-focused, which was necessary just largely from a numbers perspective. They were going to be losing a lot of linemen. After the end of the next season, they've been thin and struggling with both depth and high-end talent on the defensive line for a few years now. And so the focus from the beginning was we're going to shore up those areas. And I think that they succeeded pretty well on the offensive line. The defensive line is still a little bit of a question mark. And then it's just a matter of finding guys that fit what Wilcox wants to do on defense, getting lots of linebackers for his 3-4, and making this a local recruiting program again. Cal's best years are almost always when they get the best local guys, when Marshawn Lynch decides that he's going to stay at home. When Javid Best decides he's going to stay at home rather than having those guys go away to USC or Oregon.
Getting into the guys that are already on campus and that are going to play a big role in this year's team, the big story, it seems like at least, that is going to be that main thing that Cal fans are looking at heading into spring ball is the quarterback battle. And junior Ross Bowers played almost every single snap last season, but he was a little bit up and down. And then added to the mix this year is South Carolina transfer Brandon McElwain, who played for the Gamecocks in 2016 as a freshman. He's eligible. Plus there's senior Chase Forrest. He's back in the mix, and at least from reading, it sounds like that was a very narrow quarterback competition last season between him and Ross Bowers. So as we stand here in February before spring ball, how do you expect that competition to play out? And do you think it'll be one that is one of those QB battles that isn't even really truly decided even when the season begins?
I think that that's entirely possible. I think there are at least three names that it wouldn't surprise me if they were starting in Game 1 in September. You already mentioned Bowers and McElwain. There's also Chase Garbers, who redshirted last year and will perhaps be involved. I don't think that Chase Forrest is likely to have a shot. He's had a couple other battles he's been involved in and has always, unfortunately, been come in second best. And I doubt that's changing his senior year, but you never know. And it is really the defining question of the offseason. Cal is pretty set with returners on the line, at wide receiver, at running back. But the offense did struggle last year, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that the offense really struggled to throw deep with any accuracy and consistency. If they can find a guy on the roster who can get the ball deep a little bit more, it should open up a lot of things on the offense. And so will Bowers develop that over the offseason? Is there somebody waiting in the wings who has that ability? That's probably what spring and fall ball will be trying to figure out.
Which one of those guys do you think gives the offense its highest ceiling?
Well, we know what Bowers can do, and that's consistency. He's going to hit the short throws. We also have at least a little bit of a sense of what McElwain can do, because he did play a little bit with South Carolina. And I wouldn't say he set the world on fire, although he was a true freshman, so I guess we have to have some leniency. Just for lack of the unknown, you'd have to think that Garbers might have the highest ceiling, because we haven't seen what he can do yet, and so he's something of an unknown. I don't think that there's an obvious, there isn't a 4 or 5 star guy waiting in the wings who can set the world on fire. It's probably going to be about who is the best able to balance the occasional big play threat with more of a game manager mentality.
As you mentioned, whoever wins that job is going to have a ton of talent to work with. Cal is bringing a ton back production-wise from both the running back and receiver spots, and you look at it starting with running back. Patrick Laird rushed for over 1,100 yards last season. You also have top 2 receivers from last season in senior Vic Warden III and junior Kanawai Noah. They're back. And then you add in both Demetrius Robertson and Melquise Stovall, who were injured basically all of last season, but both had very productive freshman years in 2016, and Robertson in particular was pretty awesome. With all that said, the ceiling for this offense as a whole seems like it's really high if they're just able to get consistent quarterback play.
Yeah, like I said, they're set at the skill positions, they're set at line. It's a question of, do they have a quarterback with the accuracy, the consistency to get the ball out to them? And it's a fair question. They just really couldn't go deep last year, and it wasn't entirely clear how much of that was a lack of speed, because, like you mentioned, Robertson and Stovall being hurt, or a lack of a quarterback with the arm to get that ball deep to them. We don't really know what was the bigger issue, so we're going to have to find that out once the season starts. But the hope is that they were remarkably good at kind of dinking and dunking their way down the field. If they can add just a little bit of a deep threat to go along with that, they could be pretty productive. But that's a very huge question mark.
Yeah, Cal was in the bottom 15 in passing ISO PPP last year, which measures how explosive your plays through the air are. But you look at that receiving core, and just those 4 guys alone, you would figure that if they're just able to have a consistent quarterback be able to get them the ball, that they'll be able to fix that. But as to the identity of the offense as a whole for Cal last year, we saw standard downs and passing downs. No matter which one it was, there was a lot of passing. So do you expect that identity to continue to be get the ball to the playmakers at wide receiver early and have them open things up for Laird and the rest of the running game?
Probably. So one thing that's worth noting is when Cal came into the season, their offensive line was largely new starters, and it took them a long time to really gel as a unit, and the running game struggled badly the first half of the season, really. And I think that they threw out of necessity. It was kind of your classic air raid passes that are really run sort of situation. And as the season went along, Laird got more experience. The line gelled a little bit. They started running a lot better later in the year. admittedly against some of the weaker run defenses of the Pac-12, but still they had some struggles earlier in the year against weak run defenses as well. With basically the entire line coming back, I think that the running game should be a little bit more of a threat on standard downs, but we'll have to see. And even then, against the USCs and the Washingtons of the world, I'm not sure how well they'll really be able to run the ball. But it's nice to know that they'll have a shot at it at least.
Earlier on, you referenced the improvement in the defense, and they went from 107th in defensive S&P Plus in 2016 up to 79th, which, given the little time he had to work with compared to other first-year head coaches, I would say is pretty damn good, especially given how bad Cal's defense had been the prior couple of seasons, and he came in with a strong defensive background. What's your outlook for them this season now that both Wilcox, his staff, and the players have a full year of being able to get acclimated to what the schemes are, what the strengths and weaknesses of the players are?
So I think the defining question will be how much production they can get out of the defensive line. The secondary should be solid. Most of the returners are coming back. They've got a few linebackers coming back who played a consistent amount after a couple of guys got hurt last year. They lose a couple of defensive linemen, and those guys were good but not world beaters. There wasn't a lot of depth there, and so I have concerns about their ability to find some defensive linemen who are going to play at a higher level than replacement rate, particularly at nose tackle. And while I have faith in their ability to coach guys up, that's probably the position where you just want to see size, strength, talent. So I have some concerns on the line, but it's just nice to knowing that the coaching staff is going to be able to coax a basic level of competence out of their players. The difference that Wilcox provided last year, just at the linebackers compared to the year prior, was just night and day. The exact same players playing at a completely different level because they were being fundamentally coached for the first time in their college career.
What do you think the strength of this defense is going to be in 2018?
Certainly the secondary. You got a couple of guys who were playing as true freshmen, redshirt freshmen at the cornerback position, Cam Bynum and blanking on the name of the other one, Elijah Hicks. Both were really solid, being kind of thrown in as young guys, somewhat unexpectedly. They beat out a couple of seniors who had more experience. With a full year under their belt, they should be in pretty good shape. Cal's safeties are solid. They should be able to play nickel really well. They've got some linebackers that are pretty solid in coverage. They should be good on coverage on passing downs. I expect the secondary to be a strength.
Is there an expectation from Cal fans that in 2-3 years from now that they'll be one of the best defenses in the conference given Wilcox's history?
That's the hope. I think that fans who are aware of the importance of recruiting are a little more circumspect about those chances because Cal has just never, other than a couple of years in the Tedford era, have never really recruited better than 5th, 6th, 7th in the Pac-12. And to get to that level, they probably need to up their talent level. But the coaching staff has the chops that if they get lucky on a couple of lower rated guys or, pick up a couple of 4 stars here and there, that if the chips fall right, that's in the cards because they do have that level of schematic coaching ability.
One thing that stands out about the Pac-12 heading into this season is there is a lot of change. 5 new head coaches. You look at USC, they lose a ton of talent. Basically everything outside of Washington kind of seems like a question mark. Where does Cal stand in the Pac-12 hierarchy right now in your mind?
So Cal fans have been discussing that we see this as maybe our first opportunity to make some noise in years, partly because of some turmoil in some other programs. Washington is the obvious obstacle in the north, and USC, despite losing a lot of talent, is, as usual,
still
replacing
USC.
it. Yeah, they always replace that talent. So those are the 2 big obstacles on Cal's schedule that it's kind of tough to foresee wins without some on-field weirdness. After that, I don't think that there's a team that it would be surprising to see Cal beat. But on the same token, there are a lot of teams that wouldn't be surprising to see Cal be beaten by them. So it's tough to win all those coin flip games. Washington State, Stanford, Oregon, Arizona are all going to be teams where, the Vegas line is probably not going to be more than a few points in either direction. But it's nice going into a season where there aren't very many games where we don't look at them and think, hey, we could get that one if things fall right.
Yeah, to your point, it seems like if there is a year for them to take advantage of turnover in the conference and get back to a bowl game, it would be this year, because you look at the non-conference, and I would say it's light. North Carolina is coming off a really bad year, but you would figure, especially with their recruiting class they brought in, that they'll be better. Cal gets them at home. BYU, they play them on the road. BYU's an absolute train wreck right now, and then they play Idaho State before that off week before conference play starts, and they play in their first 4 games 4 new head coaches in Oregon, the game at Arizona, UCLA, and at Oregon State. So you would figure if they're able to have success early on that they should be able to contend for a bowl.
Yeah, I think that's the baseline expectation this year. Last year, the bowl was sort of that would be a sign that they're overachieving. And they almost got there. And so now with so much talent coming back and so much turnover in the rest of the conference, not getting to a bowl game would be a pretty big disappointment considering all those factors.
So I was going to ask you what the fan expectation was, but you said that the baseline expectation is a bowl game. So I guess I'll ask, what's the general feeling amongst the fan base right now? Is it optimism? Are people cautiously pessimistic? Is everything kind of just riding on this quarterback battle? How are people feeling as we head into spring ball in 2018?
Definitely optimism. I think people generally see Wilcox as good a hire as Cal could ever reasonably make, considering the turmoil in our athletic department, our stature in the world of college football, our ability to spend money. And then for this particular year, I think people are looking at 7 to 8 wins as sort of a baseline expectation that if they get lucky, they could maybe exceed that. The long-term prognosis is, does the staff have what it takes to upgrade Cal's recruiting so that they can consistently compete at a level above sort of middle of the conference? And that remains to be seen, and it might take a few years to sort of figure that out.
Well, if you want to keep up with anything that happens in spring football and in the 2018 for the Cal Golden Bears, be sure to visit the best Cal website on the internet, and that would be California Golden Blogs. Follow them on Twitter at Golden Blogs. And Nick, where can people find your work?
Well, I exclusively write for Golden Blogs. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I am... God, I don't even know what the heck my Twitter handle is. I almost never advertise myself.
I got it down here. It's at NorCal Nick CGB. So I got your back on that one, my
Thank
man.
you.
Make sure to follow Nick on Twitter at NorCal Nick CGB. Like I said, be sure to follow Cal Golden Blogs on Twitter, California Golden Blogs on Twitter at Golden Blogs, and visit CaliforniaGoldenBlogs.com. Nick, I appreciate you joining the show, talking all things Cal. I know I'm excited to watch them this season in the Pac-12, and I appreciate you joining the show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I hope you all enjoyed that discussion with Nick Kranz of California Golden Blogs. I know that I did, and I am very intrigued to see what Cal does leading up to the season and as we get into the 2018 season and what their place is going to be in the Pac-12 and specifically within that Pac-12 North. And a lot's going to ride on the QB competition, so we have a long way to go until the season begins, and I'm thinking that maybe that's going to drag out into the actual season unless Ross Bowers really steps up in the offseason and is able to kind of put a stranglehold on that job. We may see a little bit of quarterback shuffling with Cal this season, so something to look out for. But whoever gets that quarterback job is going to have a lot to work with. Demetrius Robinson, one of the more under-the-radar players at wide receiver in Cal's receiving group as a whole, if I haven't already just beat that topic or sentiment into the ground, is one of my favorites and one of the most underrated in the country. So if they're able to make that work, with Justin Wilcox's defense, then there's no reason that they shouldn't go bowling. So interested to watch and see what Cal does in Justin Wilcox's second season. As I wrap up today's show, I want to thank everybody for listening, especially if you're a first-time listener. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, search the Two Stripes Podcast there, and leave a review, and you can find all the old episodes. The off-season ones are pretty evergreen, so you can go back and listen to them until the season starts, and I'll have a ton more coming in the next few weeks. I already have an episode recorded about South Carolina with Chris Stanley of Garnet and Black Attack.com. That was a lot of fun. We went about 30 minutes talking about the Gamecocks and where they stand in the SEC, and they're in kind of a similar space to Cal in that there's a lot of change in the SEC East, and South Carolina can take advantage of that under Will Muschamp, who's secretly done a pretty good job there. So be on the lookout for that, dropping on Monday, my conversation with Chris Stanley of Garnet and Black Attack.com. And in addition to finding the show on Apple Podcasts, you can also go to SoundCloud.com/TwoStripesPod, find the show there. And you can also find the show on my YouTube channel by going to YouTube.com/Colton Denning. I upload the show there, and I upload a lot of college football highlights there as well. They tend to be Ohio State centric, but check it out, YouTube.com/Colton Denning, and get your college football fix from any of those avenues. Going to try to get through this offseason together and talk about as much college football as I can. So if you enjoy the show, please support. It definitely means the world to me. And the people that have supported, I appreciate it. Until next week, though, I'm going to sign off from snowy Boulder, Colorado. Hope you all have a very nice weekend, and I will talk to you next week right here on the Two Stripes Podcast.